Hi everyone, we're going to prove what the derivatives of sine and cosine are. And before you get started, the main things you need to know is the limit of sine of delta x over delta x equals 1. And we've already studied this, or I already did a video on this one. And these are your special trig limits that you need to know. You also need to know from probably pre-cal your sum and difference identities for sine and cosine. Okay, just recall what these are. Now, so we're going to get started and we're going to let f of x equals sine of x. Now we want to find the derivative, so we're going to do the derivative of sine of x with respect to x. So we want sine of x equals the limit is delta x approaches 0, and everywhere there's an x, I'm going to put x plus delta x based on my definition of a derivative minus sine of x all over delta x. Now I'm going to use my sum of identity of sine. This would be your alpha, let's do alpha plus beta. So that's going to give you sine of x cosine of delta x plus cosine of x sine of delta x minus sine of x all over delta x. Right? Now, I want to use my special trig limits that I know about. So I'm going to regroup this so I can get some ones and zeros in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is just copy this guy down. So that's going to be cosine of x, sine of delta x, then him minus sine of x, and I'm going to factor out sine. So I'm going to get 1, and this is going to be minus cosine of x, delta x. Now, this is all over delta x. Okay, now what I'm going to do is go ahead and use my difference rules for differentiation and split this up. So I'm going to be basically splitting this up with this. Alright, so that's going to be cosine of x times sine of delta x all over delta x. I'm writing it like this so because we already know that this equals 1. And then minus sine of x. I'm pulling him out, and then I'm going to do the limit as delta x approaches 0 of this guy. So it's going to be 1 minus cosine of delta x all over delta x. Okay, and the reason I did that, again, because we know this equals 1, and I know this equals 0. Alright, so when we do that, we're going to get, when I take the limit, I get cosine of x times 1 minus sine of x times 0, and that gives you cosine of x. Okay? Now we're going to do cosine, and cosine is going to be, we're going to let f of x equal cosine of x, and take the derivative with the limit process. And everywhere there's an x, I'm going to put delta x, x plus delta x, and then subtract the whole fraction. And this is all over delta x. Now use my difference, or my sum and difference identities for cosine. This would be alpha plus beta. So we're going to expand it as cosine of x times cosine of delta x. Remember, it's minus sine of x, sine of delta x. Then we have minus cosine of x all over delta x. So, I'm going to take the limit, and now I want to use my special limits of sine and cosine and rewrite this. So, I'm going to do cosine of x times, what I'm doing, I'm grouping these two. I'm going to group these two together. So that's going to be cosine of x times cosine of delta x minus 1. So if you FOIL this back, you'll get that and that. And then I'm going to subtract and use my difference properties and take the limit. I'm going to split this up, and this is all over delta x, by the way. Alright, and this is going to be sine of x times sine of delta x over delta x. So that's just this piece right in here. So I just pulled it out. And the reason I did that again is because I know this equals 0. So we have basically cosine of x times 0 minus, and we know this equals 1. So we have minus 1 times sine of x. Well, this cancels, so our derivative of cosine is negative sine of x. Now, if we look at some derivatives involving cosine and sine, I can look at y equals 2 sine of x. Well, the derivative of sine is cosine, so the derivative would be 2 cosine of x, because this is just a constant. Alright, and another one would be y equals sine of x over 2. I can write this as 1/2 sine of x. So the derivative would be 1/2 cosine of x, or cosine of x over 2. And let's do one more. We have y equals x plus cosine of x. I'm going to use my sum products of derivatives and split it up. The derivative of x is just 1. And then the derivative of cosine is negative sine. So that's going to be negative sine of x. All right? That's all. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.